Hi everyone, I'm Aaron St. James and I use he, him pronouns. I'm genuinely humbled to be a part of this forum and I apologise for not being there in person as I've double booked myself and have an exam on during this exact time, so wish me luck. The title of my talk is Breaking the Mould, From Margins to Mainstage. And really, it's about a simple but radical question, which is, what if those of us who have always been studied were invited to become the researchers ourselves? This isn't just my story, it's also the story of how we built Diversified, a student-led project that's shifting not just education, but research itself. This is a talk about disruption, but also about possibility. So today I want to take you on a journey from exclusion to excellence, from being researched about to leading research with, and I hope you'll see why the shift matters, not just for neurodivergent students like me, but for the future of knowledge itself. Let me introduce Diversified. So I'm a co-founder of Diversified, and this project is led by students like myself and others, run by and for neurodivergent students and staff. And that's important because it flips the traditional power dynamic of research. Instead of being consulted or studied, students became the drivers of this process. We took principles from universal design for learning, which many of you may know in the context of accessible teaching, and asked, what if we applied them to research itself? That's where the universal design for research, or UDR methodology, was integrated. Our process is simple but powerful. First, problems are identified by the community itself. Then students and academics co-design the research methods, with power genuinely shared. And finally, the findings are expressed in multiple forms. Not just journal papers, but toolkits, videos, and exhibitions, as we'll go into later. The framework is grounded in 4 principles: voice-centered design, collaborative inquiry, iterative co-creation, and universal benefit, meaning the solutions that start at the margins often end up helping the centre too. So this wasn't just an academic exercise, it was methodological innovation. We were repurposing UDL into universal design for research, and that's what makes Diversified different. To understand why this shift matters, let's zoom out. Traditional research often operates on what we call the deficit model. It studies neurodivergent people as problems to be fixed, subjects needing intervention. But UDL taught us something important. If you design learning with multiple means of engagement, representation, and expression, you don't just make classrooms more accessible, you unlock their potential to be richer, fairer, and better for everyone. UDR takes UDL principles and moves them into research. Instead of asking, how do we fix these students? We ask, how do we fix our systems? How can we research with, not on, marginalised communities? It's a shift from deficit to asset, from exclusion to inclusion. And Diversified has been about operationalizing that, showing what happens when lived experience leads research, not just participates in it. Here's the reality check. Disabled and neurodivergent students are navigating higher education with systems and odds stacked against them. The Bureau of Statistics 2019 looked at graduation rates of disabled students and found that 49.45% of students graduated compared to 68% of their non-disabled peers. That gap isn't about talent, it's about systems designed to exclude. A study of Australian universities found 72% scored below average in serving autistic students. That's environments misfitting cognition and pacing. Only 37% of students disclose disability at all. Why? Because the trust cost is too high and the system punishes disclosure. and only 8.1% of autistic Australians hold a bachelor degree or higher, versus 31.2% of people without autism. That's not just personal loss, that's pipeline collapse. We're losing researchers, innovators, and leaders before they even get a chance. As Bunbury put, higher education often disables students more than it enables them. That's the problem Diversified set out to address. So I want to be raw here. My journey into academia has been anything but easy. And I know generally it's not supposed to be easy. But as I come from a lower SES background, and being first in my family to enter into university, and soon to hold a degree, navigating neurodivergence, physical disability, chronic health conditions, trauma, and imposter syndrome just added so many extra layers that most don't even see or even consider. Honestly, the academic environment felt alien, like it wasn't built for me or people like me. It put me at a greater disadvantage than most. But something happened when I co-founded Diversified. Instead of being researched, I was invited in as a co-researcher. The script flipped. Suddenly, I wasn't a subject to be studied. I was a colleague. I found peers, not hierarchies. That shift wasn't just professional. It was an identity transformation. For the first time, I felt like an intellectual equal. Let me take this further. Traditionally, I would have stayed on the outside, treated as a subject, defined by my deficits, and excluded from even entering in research. That's the reality for so many students still today. But through universal design for research and co-production, the story changed. I became a co-researcher and designer. My lived experience wasn't just valid, it was expertise. And here's the proof. 4 publications, presenting internationally, winning several awards, and now on the pathway to a PhD by prior publication, where my own body of co-produced work becomes the foundation of my doctorate. So when I talk about transformation, moving from margins to Mainstage, I'm not speaking theoretically. I'm standing here as proof. I am living evidence that when lived experience is invited in, exclusion turns into innovation. This is the heart of UDR, as when we change who researches and how, we change what is even possible to imagine in research. Now let's zoom out from my personal journey to the biggest systemic problem. This is what we call the leaky pipeline. At every stage, entry, middle, and exit, people fall through. Rigid systems, hidden curriculums, unrealistic conformity expectations, and the leaks, they're not just cracks in the students, they're cracks in the system. So how do we fix the leaks? Not by patching students up, but by redesigning the pipeline itself. That's where co-design and co-production come in, as when lived experience drives the research alongside policy and practice, we don't just stop the leaks, we transform the whole flow. And the key shift, moving from tokenism to real partnership. That's when trust builds, relevance sticks, and change actually lasts. The key innovation here, the student became the lead researcher, not the research subject. Here's the turning point, a real-life catalyst moment. Traditionally, when a student hit an inaccessible assessment brief, the cycle was predictable. Complain to disability services, get an individual adjustment, advocate for yourself, and the problem persists for everyone else. That's what you see here on the left. The traditional research response, student as the problem. But in Diversified, the script flipped. The student didn't just file a complaint. She redesigned the brief itself. using accessibility principles, then collaborated with academics and staff. That shift, what you see on the right, turned an individual struggle into a system-wide solution. Suddenly the student wasn't the subject being studied. She became the solution designer. This is the heart of Nothing About Us Without Us. When lived experience leads the work. We don't just patch problems, we transform systems. So let's get practical. Why embed UDL into every single research phase? Because too often, research is still done on students, not with them. Lived experience gets reduced to consultation, while the people most impacted rarely get credit or real power. At Diversified, we flipped that script. We embed UDL into methodology itself. Every phase, from how problems are defined to how findings are shared. That means multiple means of representation, workshops in visual, auditory, and kinesthetic formats, with captions and flexible documentation, multiple means of engagement, participants choosing their own level of involvement, with culturally responsive facilitation, framed through strengths, not deficits, and multiple means of expression, outputs that aren't locked in journals, but also toolkits, digital stories, community presentations, and even policy briefs. What does that do? It transforms methodology into a tool for equity. As Cook Sather reminds us, co-production doesn't just create belonging, it deepens engagement and empowers students as active agents of change. That's the power of UDR in practice. Now let's bring UDR to life with Storybox. The challenge we asked was, how do we move beyond academic discourse to create genuine public engagement with neurodiversity research? The answer was co-production. Representation came from community members themselves creating audio-visual narratives, digital storytelling, and engagement happened in participant-led workshops, in accessible spaces, designed with them, not for them, and expression, digital storytelling rolled out across Sydney throughout Storybox installations, research literally on the streets. And there's something bigger here too. Storybox wasn't just a project, it was a pluriversal act, as Escobar puts it, co-creating many worlds where many worlds fit. That's where UDR makes possible. That's what UDR makes possible. Spaces where marginalised voices don't just join the conversation, they reshape it. And here's the ripple effect. When research looks like this, it doesn't just inform academia, it changes public imagination. That's the kind of innovation that happens when we stop seeing lived experience as token input and start recognising it as expertise. So all of this, the struggle, the barriers, the co-production, the flipping of the script, it didn't just stay locked in one classroom or one project. It grew into something bigger. From one inaccessible assessment brief that nearly excluded the student, we then built the Diversified Inclusive Teaching Toolkit. And now it's recognised internationally as a resource for embedding universal design for learning in classrooms. It started small, one brief as I said before, but now it's a resource universities are using globally. And there are 4 parts I want to highlight from a UDR perspective. First, the co-design checklists. So accessibility isn't an afterthought, but baked into planning from the start. The second is the research design aspect, as always adapting, always responsive to the people in the room. Third, lived experience videos, because sometimes the most powerful shift comes from hearing those voices directly, unfiltered from those with lived experience. And finally, the implementation roadmap, a practical step-by-step guide to make this all real and to help with the uptake from academics. But here's the kicker. It's been easier to get this toolkit picked up internationally than inside our own institution. Why is that? Why do we embrace inclusion when it's packaged as a global success story, but struggle to live it in our own systems within UNSW? That tension between external recognition and internal resistance is exactly the paradigm shift we're fighting for within Diversified. And yes, we even had a Yoda moment in the design process, thanks to Karen Chris, a Diversified co-founder, because sometimes wisdom comes in unexpected forms. Do or do not. There is no try, which feels very relevant when it comes to inclusion. Stop talking about it and start embedding it. You can scan the QR code to view the implementation map and start making change today. Now here's the real heart of what we're doing. For too long, research has been stuck about asking the same tired questions. How can we help them? What's wrong with these students? That's the deficit model baked into the system. But Diversified flips it. We don't ask how we can help them. We ask how can participants lead this research? What's wrong with our systems, not our students? That's the paradigm shift. When lived expertise drives this inquiry, you don't just measure whether someone got a bit more access, you measure whether we transformed the system together. That's a completely different benchmark for success. And this isn't just me saying it. The Inclusive Design Research Centre reminds us that if lived experience isn't at the table, then we're violating the principle of nothing about us without us. And honestly, that's the standard we have to hold ourselves to. So let's be clear. This is not about awareness anymore. Awareness is a poster on a wall. Redesign is changing how that system itself works. And that's exactly what UDR makes possible. So to wrap up, this isn't just my story, and it's definitely not just about one project. It's about showing that when lived experience is recognized as expertise, research transforms. We've seen that universal design for research doesn't just tweak the system, it rewires it. It creates new pathways, new futures, and new leaders. The real message I want to leave with you all is this. Exclusion is costly. It doesn't just lose students, it loses tomorrow's researchers, tomorrow's leaders, tomorrow's innovators. That's too high a price to pay. The shift has already begun. The question is, will you join us? Because inclusion isn't charity. It's not an afterthought. Inclusion is innovation. It's excellence. And together we can redesign research for everyone. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them to Kate, who will pass them on to me. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your time and attention. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.